Time to Remember. A program presented by the BBC in which Leslie Baily, journalist and broadcaster, looks back on some of the events of our lives.
I have in my hands an old copy of an American magazine, McClure's magazine. The date on it is 1896. In it, I find an interview between an American journalist who was visiting London and a strange foreign inventor or something of the sort he met there, name of Guglielmo Marconi. Some curious things this young man from Italy had to say. The journalist got a good story out of him. Let me direct your attention to the last sentence in his write-up in this magazine.
The air is full of promises, of miracles. The certainty is that strange things are coming.
1896. Well, strange things have come since then. So much so that it's difficult now to get a focus on the world as it was in 1896. Before we read more of this historic interview with Marconi, let's try to put ourselves into life as it was then, 1896. There is, of course, no radio broadcasting, no aeroplanes. In England, there's a bicycle craze. Even ladies go about on bicycles, clad in bloomers. But an article in the Illustrated London News predicts new possibilities.
Horseless carriages promise to be a great institution for ladies with plenty of pluck to go about alone and steer themselves, but not enough vital force to propel a bicycle.
In America, Henry Ford, a machinist in the Edison Works of Detroit, has made in his spare time his first horseless carriage, 4 horsepower, 2-cylinder. But he hasn't yet gone into the motor business.
And at the London Polytechnic, there is given the first display of the animated pictures ever seen in Britain.
Hollywood is a quiet Californian village of some 500 population, where the arrival of the daily stagecoach is the only excitement.
The British Empire is still being built.
From all the great powers, Britain, the United States, Germany, explorers and colonizers are opening up unknown territory, carving up spheres of influence in Africa, Central America, the Pacific Islands.
At Balmoral Castle in Scotland in 1896, Queen Victoria writes in her diary,
Today is the day on which I have reigned longer by a day than any English sovereign. And the people wish to make all sorts of demonstrations, which I asked them not to do until I had completed the 60 years next June. But notwithstanding this, people of all kinds and ranks sent congratulations. They were all most loyally expressed, and some very prettily.
It was from a New York where the tallest skyscraper was of 19 stories, compared with the Empire State's 102 today, that the reporter from McClure's magazine came to London and told his cabby to drive to a house in Westbourne Park, where the 22-years-old Italian electrician, as he was described, had taken lodgings.
Mr. Marconi, there's a story going around that you've given a demonstration to British officials, some sort of new signaling system.
Yes, I installed my transmitter on the roof of the General Post Office here in London.
And the message was received
500 yards away.
Am I to understand you did this without wires?
Yes, I am experimenting to find how far the wireless waves will travel.
And do these waves really pass through things?
I am forced to believe the waves will penetrate anything and everything.
Gee, but surely fog will prevent them?
No, sir. Nothing prevents them.
Do you mean to say, Mr. Marconi, that I could send my report of this interview from London to New York?
Please remember, wireless is a new field. I do not wish to be recorded as saying anything can actually be done beyond what I have already been able to do. With regard to the future, so far as I can see, it does not present any impossibilities to signal to New York.
At the end of his interview, McClure's reporter said,
Such are the astounding statements and views of Mr. Marconi. What their effects will be remains to be seen. The imagination abandons as a hopeless task the attempt to conceive what, in the use of electric waves, the immediate future holds in store. The air is full of promises, of miracles. The certainty is that strange things are coming.
"5 years later, in 1901, Marconi sent a signal across the Atlantic from Ireland to Newfoundland. But wireless remained to the men in the street a mystery, a scientist's experiment, quite outside the ordinary daily round. Something was needed to dramatize its possibilities, something the press could headline. We had to wait a few more years for it, to 1910.
Dr. Crippen arrested by wireless. The invisible bloodhound follows the scent across the high seas.
Thus the 1910 headlines. Well, crime and sex and adventure at sea are always good for headlines, and here we had all three together, and science pulling out an ace into the bargain. The affair of Dr. Crippen begins in the most unspectacular of places, a rather dreary domestic terrace in Camden Town, London.
At 39 Hilldrop Crescent lives the American-born Dr. Crippen, a mild little man married to a flashy fifth-rate music hall singer who calls herself Belle Elmore. It's not a happy marriage. Nagging and frowsty, La Belle Elmore disappears. She is replaced at 39 Hilldrop Crescent by Dr. Crippen's secretary, a quiet, well-mannered girl, Ethel Leneve. The appearance of two such utterly different ladies in the affair Crippen ensures it a wide interest among women as well as men when the story breaks in the press.
Detective Inspector Dew of Scotland Yard calls one day at Hilldrop Crescent to ask some questions. Dr. Crippen says his wife has gone to America and died there. A few days later, the police come back. The house is empty. Under the floor of the cellar, Inspector Dew finds parts of a body. Human, female.
And now this sordid story suddenly becomes a melodrama. And it had a completely new twist. The Canadian Pacific liner Montrose sailed from Antwerp for Canada under the command of Captain H.G. Kendall. Here is a recording he made for us many years ago.
Soon after we sailed from Antwerp, bound for Quebec, I happened to glance out at the porthole of my cabin, and behind a lifeboat saw two men. I walked along the boat deck and got into conversation with the elder man. I noticed that there was a mark on the bridge of his nose through wearing spectacles. I went to my cabin and, taking out a London newspaper, studied the description of a man wanted by Scotland Yard.
5 feet 3 or 4, hair light brown, wears spectacles.
I immediately examined the passenger list and ascertained that the two were traveling as Mr. Robinson and Son. When the bell went for lunch, I tarried until the coast was clear, then slipped into Robinson's cabin unobserved, where I noticed two things: that the boy's felt hat was packed around the rim to make it fit, and that he had been using a piece of a woman's bodice as a face flannel. I returned to the dining saloon and sat next to the Robinsons, and kept my eyes open. The boy's manners at the table were ladylike. In the next 2 days, we developed our acquaintance. Mr. Robinson, with the acme of politeness, quiet-mannered, a non-smoker. On the third day out, I gave my wireless operator a message for Liverpool.
130 miles west of Lizard. Have strong suspicions Crippen and friend among saloon passengers. Friend dressed as boy. Voice, manner, and build undoubtedly a girl.
I remember Mr. Robinson sitting in a deck chair, looking up at the wireless aerials and listening to the crackling of our crude spark transmitter and remarking to me what a wonderful invention it was. I sent several more reports, but our weak apparatus was soon out of communication with land. I knew that the liner Laurentic had left Liverpool the day after my first wireless message, and with her superior speed would reach the Newfoundland coast before me.
From Laurentic to Montrose. We'll board you at Father Point. Strictly confidential. From Inspector Dew, Scotland Yard. On board Laurentic.
From Captain Montrose to Dew, Laurentic. Shall arrive Father Point about 6 a.m. tomorrow. Should advise you to come off in a small boat with pilot disguised as second pilot.
That night was dreary and anxious. The sound of our foghorn every few minutes adding to the monotony. At Father Point, the pilots came on board and came straight to my cabin. I sent for Mr. Robinson. When he entered, I stood with the detective facing the door, holding my revolver inside my coat pocket. As he came in, I said, "Let me introduce you." Mr. Robinson put out his hand. The detective grabbed it, at the same time removing his pilot's cap, and said, "Good morning, Dr. Crippen. Do you know me? I'm Inspector Dew from Scotland Yard."
Well, there was no resistance. Captain Kendall told me that Crippen was utterly dumbfounded. It had never occurred to him that wireless could report his flight from mid-Atlantic. How could it? In 1910.
The invisible bloodhound has followed the scent across the high seas.
At that time, 1910, only a few hundred ships in the world had wireless. Crippen was unlucky to try to escape in one of them. Of course, wireless still had no place in the home, but very soon its value to humanity became dramatically clear to everyone.
The morning of October the 9th, 1913, a grey dawn over the Atlantic. The steamship Volturno, carrying emigrants from Europe to Canada, lunges into mountainous seas. In her wireless cabin, Mr. Seddon, the chief Marconi operator, pounds away at his Morse key.
Oh, nearly went overboard that time. You are, Mr. Seddon. Another message from the skipper to put out.
Right. Volturno to all stations. Ship on fire. Numbers 1 and 2 holds blazing furiously. Require immediate assistance. 650 passengers and crew. SOS from Volturno. Well, how's it going forward, Pennington?
She's like a furnace. Decks are so hot the fire hoses lying on them are getting burnt.
Half a tick. Got a signal.
To Volturno from Carmania. Coming with all speed. Volturno from Carmania.
Carmania from Volturno. Received okay. Please come quickly.
All that day, messages flash over the Atlantic between the Volturno and her distant rescuers. Unsuccessful attempts are made to launch the boats. In the afternoon, the fire spreads to the boiler room. The ship's engines lapse into deathly silence. But as darkness falls, ship after ship looms up, and soon Carmania's searchlight picks out a ring of 11 ships standing by, while Volturno rolls helplessly, her decks glowing red hot.
I'm fed up with wearing these perishing headphones. How long have we been sitting here, Pennington?
Nearly 18 hours. And how long she'll last.
Perhaps, with luck, till dawn.
Passengers are having a hell of a time huddled up below. I suppose the skipper won't try launching any more boats.
There'll be murder in this sea.
That lot of good it was. Us whistling up all those ships. There they are, standing off in a circle while we go down.
Too rough to do anything.
That's all very well, but...
What? We've got a new signal.
Volturno from Narragansett. Oil tanker. Do you still require assistance? We offer to pour oil on sea. Can reach you by dawn.
Oil tanker! Oil tanker! Narragansett from Volturno. Yes, come at once. Position, latitude 4912 north. Longitude 3451 west.
Volturno from Narragansett shall be there at 6 a.m. with the milk.
As the light dawned on another day, the oil tanker crept into the circle of ships. The oil was pumped on the water, and the waves went down. And 675 men, women, and children were saved.
That was 1913. It made a tremendous impact on the public. The rescue of the 675, all of whom would have been lost but for the magic of wireless, as the press called it. Wireless still meant wireless telegraphy, dots and dashes, but radio engineers were, of course, interested in the idea of sending the human voice through the ether, wireless telephony. Here's one of those engineers describing the first attempt to throw the human voice across the Atlantic Ocean, Mr. W.T. Ditcham, who was in charge of a Marconi transmitter at Ballybunion in Ireland in 1919.
We tuned up the outfit to a long wavelength, which would now be thought extremely ineffective, and optimistically started calling America. The power we used was only 2 kilowatts, say the power used by a domestic electric fire. We went on the air every night for a couple of weeks, with a program consisting of bits read at random from the newspapers. Over on the other side of the Atlantic was another Marconi engineer who had travelled out to Canada, my old friend W.J. Pickett. Here he is.
Well, I took with me a special receiving set and fixed it up at Louisburg, Nova Scotia. At certain prearranged times, I switched on and listened for Ditcham's voice from the other side of the Atlantic. One day, above the crackle of atmospherics, I heard it.
Hello, Louisburg. Hello, Canada. Hello, Pickett. Can you hear me? How is speech coming through?
And that was 1919, a spectacular demonstration of wireless telephony. Soon after this, broadcasting began as an entertainment from stations all over the world. But that's a familiar story to everyone now. I want to pass on to another aspect of the magic of radio, to the year 1935.
1935, the America of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Germany of Adolf Hitler, of rising armaments and rising anxiety in the Western world, the Britain of Premier Stanley Baldwin. The bomber, said Mr. Baldwin, will always get through.
And there seemed to be no reply. The fast Nazi bombers would be upon us before they could be detected by ear or by eye. Britain's top scientists were turned in secret onto this frightening problem. One of them, Robert Watson Watt, a Scot, a humorist, a wizard boffin, if ever there was one, was asked by the British government if there was anything in the idea of a wireless death ray. Let him tell us what he thought of this possibility.
I said I thought it was a very poor possibility. But I'd do some sums, and then I'd give him a reasoned answer. Being what's politely called an organizer, that's to say somebody who gets other people to do his work for him, I set the arithmetical problem to my colleague A.F. Wilkins, who was then a junior colleague on my staff at Radio Research Station Slough. He did my sums for me, But a quite fresh possibility occurred to me at that point, and I ended a 4-page condemnation of death rays with words something like this. Meanwhile, attention is being turned to the still difficult but less unpromising problem of radio detection of aircraft as opposed to radio destruction. And numerical considerations on the method of detection will be submitted if required. They said it was required. So far, I had made no practical experiments, but I did know this. 3 years or so before, the engineers at the post office radio receiving station near St. Albans had been rather annoyed when their reception was frequently upset. They observed that, strangely enough, this coincided with aircraft taking off from or landing at Hatfield Aerodrome, a few miles away. They said this must be due to radio reflection from the aircraft. Now, I said, this is certainly due to reflection from the aircraft. Why not make use of it? It seemed to me that the ghost of St. Albans could be gainfully employed. My project for squeezing invaluable information out of a radio echo from an aircraft was communicated to a big shot at the Air Ministry, who said, as big shots would, these scientific blokes can prove anything on paper. I'd like to have someone see it.
And so Sir Robert Watson Watt, as he now is, had some apparatus designed. It was put into a very plain van and driven into a field near Daventry in the English Midlands in charge of Sir Robert's colleague, Mr. A.F. Wilkins.
I followed at leisure in my car, taking with me for a joyride my young nephew. But since it was a secret mission, I deposited him some distance away in the hedge. The powers that be had arranged for an RAF bomber, a Hayford, to fly over Daventry, and the question was whether we could detect it before it arrived. We sat inside the van, and we watched the cathode ray tube rather like the screen of a television set, on which, as I assured the scientific observer from the Air Ministry, we should see a wiggly line if my calculations were correct. I was sure they were. During the next few minutes, nobody said a word. I have often claimed since that we were all perfectly calm. Then came a dramatic and historic moment. The line wiggled vigorously. At that moment, the aircraft was about 8 miles away. We looked outside the van. We couldn't see the plane in the sky, nor could we hear it. But on the screen, the indication grew stronger.
February the 26th, 1935. For the first time, an unseen object located by radio. A few minutes later, the plane passed overhead at 6,000 feet. Watson Watt reported success to the government.
I suppose I must admit now that I was excited. I told the high-ups that with better apparatus, we'd detect aircraft at a couple of 100 miles or so, and we would plot their height and their direction of travel. Perhaps it was due to the excitement, which I wouldn't admit, that I jumped into my car and drove away, leaving my unfortunate nephew in the hedge.
Mr. Winston Churchill, who was in on the new top-secret discovery, made a veiled reference to it in the House of Commons.
Every country, said Mr. Churchill, would feel safer if once it were found that the bombing airplane was at the mercy of appliances directed from the earth. This matter should receive and command the most vigorous thought of the greatest men in our country.
A research centre was set up at Orford Ness, a deserted shingle beach on the east coast of England, and by the end of 1935, Watson Watt was detecting planes at 50 miles distance.
By now we knew that we'd found something that would detect the enemy bomber in any future war, and that could become, in peacetime, the life-saving means of guiding ships and planes through darkness and fog. Men had discovered a method of seeing without eyes.
The magic of radio, indeed. Radar. It came only 30 years after young Marconi in London had demonstrated that he could send a wireless signal 500 yards. Today, wireless signals are used to probe incredible distances into space. This sound is a signal from an American rocket 150,000 miles away in space, being received at the giant radio telescope at Jodrell Bank in England. This doesn't mean much perhaps to you or to me, but what has Professor Lovell of Jodrell Bank to say about it?
The continuous note which you heard contains the whole of the scientific information which the probe is sending back to Earth. Information about the temperature, the ion density in space, the impacts of micrometeorites, and the magnetic field as it recedes ever farther from the Earth.
And listen, this is one of the first attempts to send a voice from Earth and reflect it back as an echo from the moon.
Mr. Marconi, there's a story going around that you have given a demonstration to British officials. Some sort of new signaling system.
Yes, I installed my transmitter on the roof of the General Post Office here in London.
And the message was received
500 yards away.
And the reporter of McClure's magazine wrote truer than even he suspected in 1896.
The air is full of promises, of miracles. The certainty is that strange things are coming.
You've been listening to Time to Remember, a program written and narrated by Leslie Baily and produced for the BBC by Vernon Harris.
You can hear another Time to Remember at 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.